Hi, everybody. It's Josh with Talk About Trek, and I'm very excited because I am back today, jumping back to the TNG numbered series with Brad Ferguson's The Last Stand. This was a lot of fun. Um, just always glad to dive back into the TNG numbered series. It's just like I've said this many times before, but it's just like getting to see an episode that you never knew existed. And Brad Ferguson did a great job with this one. So let's jump right in here. The USS Enterprise crew is all that stands between two warring races intent on annihilating each other. The Last Stand. In the middle of a routine mapping mission, Captain Picard and the crew of the USS Enterprise encounter a culture just on the edge of developing warp drive technology. When they survey the planet, they are startled by a sudden approach of thousands of spacecraft from an aggressive alien race bent on destroying this emerging culture. Now, Picard has only days to resolve a conflict that has been going on for millennia. If he fails, billions will die. Yet, if he succeeds, he will unleash a powerful new threat to the Federation. So, yeah, that's actually a pretty bad back cover because it's incorrect in how you gotta do the tug with these uniforms, how the story kind of goes down. So glad I didn't read that because it would have sent me in a wrong direction. Uh, this story is about basically it starts out as your standard mapping mission, and then Captain Picard gets kind of drawn into this millennia old feud between these two warring species. But the whole thing starts out as a bit of a mystery and kind of gets revealed bit by bit by bit. Uh, I would say, as you can kind of tell by the cover, it is a Captain Picard centered novel. Data really doesn't play a huge part in it. I would say, other than Picard, maybe Troy and Riker had the next biggest spot, and then it kind of slightly features Data and Ro after that. Other than that, none of the other characters get too much time in the novel, and it's really more given towards the different species and kind of the different leaders, the two leaders of the group there, the different species. Just a very interesting story, and before we get too much into the spoiler territory, one of the things that I liked that the author said about this book was if you're going to write a Trek novel, you should write something they can't film. Put in thousands of things they can't film. And I think that's what really hits home, and what is really so wonderful about reading these Trek books is that when you have an author that realizes that they can really expand and tell this just fantastic story with all of these things that you really couldn't put on film, but you can, imagine. So it's fantastically done, and I believe this is the first book that I've read by Brad Ferguson, but I hope that he does return in the future, in one way or another, to the TNG series, because he did a great job there. So I would just again recommend this book to anybody who's looking for kind of a classic TNG adventure. No real character focus, again, just more of a very, very interesting set of worlds, or kind of conflicting worlds, I guess. And just the depth that they go into on both is very well done. So I had a lot of fun with it, and I would recommend it to you to read as well. So let's jump right into the actual story. What went down here? So the Enterprise was on a routine survey mission, checking out an unexplored part of the galaxy, when they come across this place that's kind of devastated. And they can see these two worlds, one that appears to be have devastated by nuclear attack, and another one where certain all of the higher life forms were wiped out, maybe by some kind of virus or something like that. So they're scanning these two worlds, and while they're doing that, they detect a warp signature blip in the next system over. So they set their course for that system and engage, and they're there in a very short period of time. Of course, using their faster than light technology, their warp speed, right? And that's important in this story. Before the story actually begins, they do introduce in a prologue the leader of this kind of group on the planet, and his name is Karagem. And Karagem becomes one of the kind of the main characters of the story here, and he is the first among equals, basically the leader of the council of this group, who are the how do we say that? The Lathananites, I think is how we want to say it. The Lathananites. And the Lathananites in the prologue basically have enacted, and they don't go into detail about what it is, they've enacted something called Project Blue Ultimate. So they kind of tease this little Project Blue Ultimate at the beginning, and then they jump into everything that the Enterprise is doing. So again, the Enterprise has detected these kind of warp signature blips, and they go to investigate, and that is when they find the planet Lathanthon. And the Lathanthons have pretty much been like astounded that they have got there, and this is like their first contact. They do notice as they're coming into the system that the Lathanthons have like a very Lathananites. I don't know what we're supposed to call them. But anyway, they have a very sophisticated, for their technology, series of like sensors, kind of detecting everything coming in and approaching their system. So now they get to the planet, they reach out and they contact the government there, and they're able to establish their first meeting. And before they want to kind of get too involved, they kind of want to keep their technology hidden a little bit. So they decide to go down in their shuttlecraft. They don't reveal that they have the transporter technology. And when they get down there, that's when they get kind of they get a little bit more information on what exactly is going on here. So on this planet, they meet with the Council of Ministers and the first among equals, Karagem. There's also this kind of very salty minister, and his name is like Jerigem or something, but he's the security minister, and he's pretty much convinced that the Enterprise there has come there and is in league with this enemy, which he keeps calling the Cran. And he's like, how did you get past the Cran? We know you must be working with them. There's no way you got past the Cran. Of course, we're all confused, like, who's the Cran? We didn't see any Cran. We were over here, and then we warped over here. Of course, they don't know or even think that warp speed, faster than light technology, is something they can do that's even possible. So they don't see any real reason the Enterprise, or real way the Enterprise could have got through the Cran line. And that's when they kind of reveal the Cran. And the Cran had this cloaking technology that the Enterprise couldn't get through, but once it's revealed to them from the Lathananites or whatever, now they're able to see, and they can see that there are indeed several 100,000 ships in a kind of a vast fleet which are on approach to Lathanthon. So now you get I'm probably telling this out of story, but it's fine. Telling this out of story. Telling the story out of order, but again, it's fine. So now we get to learn the tragic kind of history of the Lathananites. They give them a copy of their decades old or millennia old kind of religious writings or historical writings, and that's when you get a little bit of a backstory where they were initially in the other system where the Enterprise first found the devastating planets, and when they were in that system, there were two side-by-side planets, the Cran and the Lathananites. And the Lathananites advanced quicker than the Cran, and as they became more advanced, then they basically moved to take over and enslave the Cran, which is what they did. And for something like 1,000 years, they robbed the Cran of their resources and put them to work making all of their ships and their industries. They moved all of their polluting industries to their planet. and basically just spent 1,000 years completely and totally enslaving and ruining this whole race of people. And in that 1,000 years, this race of people learned and grew, and then they also learned how they could fight back, and that's what they did. And they rebelled against the Lathanthanites and were able to basically destroy their world. And before the final destruction was carried out, there was a certain number of refugees that were able to escape in these kind of fantastically giant asteroid ships where they traveled for thousands of years because they did not have faster than light travel before they arrived at their current location. Also, it's kind of recorded in their history as well that once their planet was destroyed by the Kran, they then retaliated against the Kran with some kind of biogenic virus or something, and then destroyed the Kran planet as well. And in part of their holy text or whatever, it's basically thought that they are due for their comeuppance. The Kran are going to come and get their revenge, and the Lathananites are going to die in fire and flame. And so it is written, and so it is to be done. And that's basically the fact of the matter. And that was how it was for thousands of years. And this religion basically controlled this whole culture. And then just recently, within the last decades, they had this revolution, and that's when Karajem and this council took over and was installed. One of the things this previous regime was doing was like a lot of child labor, and that was kind of one of the things they point out in the beginning too, that like even Karajem, the first among equals, has lost some fingers from working in the mines as a child. So some pretty interesting stuff there, just with that whole backstory, and then this like tremendous guilt that's felt by all of this whole race of people, for what was done thousands of years ago. So now that he's made contact with the Lathananites, he gets permission from them to see if he can negotiate with the Kran, and that's when the Enterprise then sends himself over to the Kran. And the Kran at first don't respond. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to contact at all. When you have one of the coolest scenes in the book that I really liked was when he orders Data to do a maneuver to basically pull the Enterprise within feet of the Kran mothership, the main ship, so that he's basically in Captain Picard and I think Counselor Troy and Riker, they're in 10 forward, like right at the front window, and they pull the thing right up to the front window of the guy's thing, trying to get his attention. And that's when they do get the attention finally of the Kran leader, who is Presider Heck. And Presider Heck presumably presides over this council, but it's kind of revealed that he's like more of like a dictator in charge, and he really does make all the decisions, and these other folks are just kind of along for the ride. So, also the Kran ships are kind of interestingly described as kind of like a lattice work of like this cube shape, right? But then within that, there's these different spheres. I drew a picture. Like that. See? Like that. Something like that. Use your imagination. That's what you're supposed to do with these books. But anyway, and they have this enormous fleet, numbering 163,000 ships, all of various sizes, but basically their whole, of course, population has lived on these ships for millennia, 5,000-6,000 years since they've left Kran, and they've been very slowly moving through space, pursuing the Lathananites. So this entire culture, this entire world basically is just kind of based on this one thought of, getting their final revenge against the Lathananites, and they're just kind of pursuing them. So at first Tech is like, of course we're not going to just talk peace now. We've been doing this for so many years now. We can't stop what we're doing now. So, but he does allow some observers to come aboard one of his largest city ship, and then to kind of see exactly the whole situation and how the Cran people feel about this. So this is when you get kind of your little side character action when you have before this happens though, when they have the initial meeting with Heck, they have kind of an interesting part where they know that they're being monitored. They're kind of like in like a waiting room or something like that. So they use a code language, and the code language they use is the way they spoke in the Darmok episode. So like he's like, "Do you remember our good friend Captain Dathan?" And then they continue to talk through these metaphors, and the Cran have no idea what they're talking about, but they're able to kind of get the message across. So that was a very cool part as well. I like that a lot. So basically, what they do is now they send two observers to the Cran ship, Riker and Troy, disguised as Cran, and at the same time they send two observers back to the Lethanonite planet, Ro and Data, disguised as Lethanonites, so they can get an equal view of kind of both sides of the situation. So with the Riker and Troy situation, they're kind of struck to see that most of the general population is not even like aware of what's going on. They're not even, anticipating this battle. They're just living their day-to-day lives. And today is actually like a special day for the Cran. It's something called Posting Day, when certain people can get like basically certain privileges for themselves as like couples and things like that. So Riker and Troy are able to find a Posting Day party and kind of sneak in to get the lay of the land. And that's when they run into this guy named Wiggins. And Wiggins kind of acts like he's sweet on Troy a little bit. And that's when they give away their names. And the names also of the Cran are also very interesting too, because they are all basically they have a first name. So you have Riker's first name was Dex, but then the rest of their name is basically their job. So Riker, his name was Dex Portside Sanitation Supervisor, and all of their names had something to do with this. So they were all kind of, their names would tell exactly what their job was and what they did, which I thought was a really interesting kind of world building thing that the author did here with this species of Cran. And actually, like, it really made me want to learn more and know more about how a species would evolve, basically on this like 1,000-year or many thousands of years long trek through space. So that part was very well done. Wiggins ends up kind of asking Troy if she wants to go off alone, and Troy agrees, trying to kind of get as much information out of Wiggins as he can. Riker already thinks, and Troy agrees, that Wiggins is probably a plant from the Cran government. That the Cran government is just trying to lead them on and kind of show them what they want them to see. And they kind of agree. So Troy goes along with Wiggins, and Wiggins sneaks her into this secret weapons facility and shows her this enormous gun, or that's what he calls it basically, that they have that's in this great giant bay. And then once he shows her that, then Riker ends up catching back up with them. They end up leaving and getting out of there. But the whole thing was basically just a kind of a giant ruse. Anyway, but before we get too far along, the other two observers, Data and Ro, so they go down to the planet Lathanton, where they have kind of a very, very interesting experience. They, well, first off, there is a warning, like a air raid siren, kind of as soon as they get there, and they're forced to take shelter in this shelter with these two Lathanthonites, and their names are, it's a young man named Teriel and an older woman named Izawidna. Anyway, and they kind of present these two opposing views of the Lathanton people. And the old woman is kind of one of the old, she kind of follows the old religion, which is supposed to be banned at this point, and is in the same mindset of like, what's happening now they deserve because of what their people did before. The young man is against that, and he feels, like he's moving on to like a new future. So there's kind of an interesting little scene that they showed there. Basically, then Data and Ro leave. Data's like, you all need to leave with us now, or you could possibly get killed. This place, there was actually a nuclear strike that was done. Anyway, that was done, and he could detect that. It wasn't done like right on top, but close by. And he was basically saying, if you stay here, the building will collapse soon enough and you will die. Uh, they decide to stay anyway. Riker and Data leave, and as they leave, the building collapses and those two characters are killed. And that's like when, at this point in the book, I kind of realized that this was going to be something a little bit darker because they don't stop the killing. I mean, like, so many people on both sides start dying at this point, and it's all because of basically on the Lathanthon side, they kind of raised a premature alarm. They were like, let's put our defenses up because we know that they're coming and they're going to be here soon. There already actually was a prior attack that could have nearly wiped out Picard and crew, but the Enterprise intervened and stopped that from happening. But basically, it was kind of an escalation on both sides. So the Thanthons set off their alarms. That caused the Cran to do their initial bombardment. And then once they did their initial bombardment, then the Lathanthonites or whatever, they retaliated against the Cran. So here initially, and they don't even kind of go over that in the book, because all you do is you see it from the perspective of Data and Ro on the planet, and you don't know what's happening until later. But that part was kind of very well done too. And like I said again, as it was at that point, I was like, wow, this is going to get a little bit dark, and it does. There's multiple strikes on both sides, and I think we're talking like, millions of people dead in the first little shots of the war. On the Lathanthon side, they're able to take out like a few of these larger city ships full of civilians. So again, multiple losses on both sides. It's then revealed through Presider Heck that basically the ruse with Riker and Troy. Of course, he knew that they were there, and he sent Wiggin in as a plant. And Wiggin had attempted to poison them. And one of the other things I like about this book is just how easily the Enterprise and their technology and their experience is able to outwit that plan. Because basically, as soon as they beam in, biofilters pick up the poison, and Riker and Troy are back on the team, in the next thing. There's basically no chance that plan is going to work for him. And it's at that point when Heck reveals, too, that the big gun that they showed them was actually just a big telescope, and it was all just a ruse anyway. So Picard says, is there anything we can do to stop this attack from happening? And Heck is determined that no, there's nothing that can be done, and this is going to carry on no matter what. So that's the situation we're left in. And then, oh my gosh, this is so good. The end of this is so good. I was reading it last night, and I was like, oh my gosh. But the end, basically, Kara-Jem contacts Picard and says, Picard, you have to do what we say, if you're going to follow your prime directive. So we're telling you now, we don't want your help anymore, and we would like you to leave the system immediately. And that's it. And he just cuts off contact, and that's the end of it. And Picard is like, well, that doesn't seem right. So he kind of finds a loophole in that he was asked previously by Presider Heck to negotiate, and he beams himself down to Kara-Jem's office to find out what is going on. And that is when you find out the real truth about Project Blue Ultimate. Now, do you remember those warp field signatures that the Enterprise picked up in the beginning? What those were actually they were testing their ultimate weapon, and their ultimate weapon was basically setting up a warp field next to their sun, which would force their sun to go nova, destroy the whole system, taking them out, but taking out the entire Cran fleet as well. And it's at this point when Kara-Jem reveals that he has just sent through the radio activation wave, which is going to go to one of the three devices planted around the sun. And it's at that point when the place will go nova. And if the Enterprise doesn't get out of there right now at warp speed, they're going to go with the whole rest of the system. Whoa, right? So, like, this is just a very cool ending, I thought, where you really didn't expect, but I don't know. The way they kind of portrayed these characters is kind of like resigned to their fate throughout the whole thing. Now that you're in the end, you can kind of see that. But anyway, Project Blue Ultimate is activated. However, the radio wave is not faster than the Enterprise. So the Enterprise is able to warp to the sun, get to these things, and it's at that point when they have to kind of use their best guess, best knowledge, and determine which one of these three do we need to target. They figure out the very best option. They think this is the one we need to target. However, automatic targeting is offline. Mr. Worf is going to have to do this manually. So, just a very well done scene at the end where you have Mr. Worf firing his 4 torpedoes manually. And you have this kind of moment of like, all right, is it going to happen? Is it going to hit? And of course it does. He's dead on, nails it, blows it up, and of course it was the one. And they're able to stop the sun from exploding. So they rush to the Crayon then at that point, and they're able to say to Presider Heck, hey, they have a way to blow up the entire system, all of you guys included. I think it's time to kind of sit down at the table and talk peace. At first, Presider Heck is like, no, but then his council rises up and kind of deposes him at this time, knowing that they're in a bit of trouble. See, the fleet of the Crayon, they don't have any faster than light travel, so all they can do is kind of accelerate and decelerate. So there's no way for them to get away, and they arrange to work a peace between the Crayon and the Lathanton, and the Crayon are able to settle on another empty planet there in that system. So the book ends with Picard having basically they're sending like expert negotiators and things there to the planet to handle it. But then at the very, 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 very end of the book, this is very cool, I thought, they have a spot here where it's the epilogue of the book ends with Heck kind of sitting in jail thinking that he's going to be executed when he is approached by another member of the Crayon saying, we have a job for you. It's like setting up for a sequel. It's so cool. I like it. But basically, when the Lathanonites set off Project Blue Ultimate, before they did that, they sent away more of their people in the asteroids again to find a new world to live on. So now the Crayon send out Presider Heck in another small fleet of ships, kind of that they can kind of sneak away without getting noticed, chasing after Lathanonites again to keep the millennia-long war going on and on and on forever. So just it was a very cool ending. Like you had your piece, and then you find out, no, this is not over and it will continue. So just really well done. I had a lot of fun with this one, and just glad to be back into the TNG numbered series, because it really is just my favorite of all the Trek stuff I read. So this is what happens if you drop your book in the shower. So don't read in the shower if you have butterfingers. Or at least find a way to not drop it in the shower. But it didn't affect the read at all. So that was Brad Ferguson's The Last Stand. Where do we go from here? We've got The Dragon's Honor next. Dragon's Honor, a novel by Keys Johnson and Greg Cox. I know nothing about it, and we're going to jump right into it without knowing anything about it, and we're going to learn about the Dragon's Honor. And is that Dr. Crusher, and why is she dressed up so fancy like that? Look at her. Yeah, that's going to be good. Anyway, we're gonna jump into that later on tonight. So, as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Live long and prosper, and we will see you all in the next one. Good night.